1952 opened with the war in Korea at a standstill, with armistice talks underway in the north. NATO would widen its reach from Europe into Asia Minor, with the addition of the nation of Turkey into its ranks. The nuclear arms race would continue, with the U.S. taking it to the next level, with the successful test of the world's first thermonuclear bomb. And the United States would select a beloved World War II hero as their next president.
Everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum. We'll take Ike to Washington.
This is the Cold War, year by year. A digest of the events of America's longest conflict. Chapter 8, 1952. As the year began, a lull had settled over the battlefield in Korea. Fighting had tapered off to a routine of patrol clashes, raids, and bitter small unit struggles for key outpost positions. General Matthew Ridgway, now the UN commander, decided that the cost of major assaults on the enemy's defenses would be more than the results could justify. The possibility of an armistice agreement emerging from the recently reopened peace talks with the North Koreans discouraged large-scale offensives by either side. Attacks were limited to those necessary to strengthen the main line of resistance and to establish an adequate outpost line. This lull would be status quo until later in the year, when both sides would begin extensive aerial bombing campaigns targeting military and civilian infrastructure. On February 18th, both Greece and Turkey became members of NATO. Their accession would play a significant role in the strategic dynamics of the alliance and in the broader geopolitics of the region, giving NATO a significant foothold in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Balkans, and the Middle East. This marked a major milestone in the history of the alliance and played a crucial role in shaping the security dynamics of the Euro-Atlantic region during the Cold War and beyond. On April 28th, the Treaty of San Francisco, signed by Japan on September 8, 1951, came into effect, formally ending Japan's period of occupation and isolation. It allocated compensation to Allied nations and former prisoners of war who had suffered from Japanese war crimes during World War II. Japan was a sovereign nation again. In Vietnam, the 6-year-old war between the French and the communist North Vietnamese forces continued, with no end in sight. Napalm, originally developed for the U.S. Chemical Warfare Service in 1942 in a secret laboratory at Harvard University, became a favorite weapon of French forces. By now, the United States, the Soviet Union, and China had become participants in the conflict, supplying both military and financial support. The U.S. was paying 80% of France's war effort, which was $3 million per day. On May 26, East Germany tightened its border with West Germany. The communist regime in the DDR claimed it was to keep out spies, terrorists, and smugglers. But in reality, it was meant to stop the mass exodus of thousands of skilled workers and other residents of the East. The ongoing departure of 10 to 20,000 such citizens each month, drawn by a desire for freedom and the booming West German economy, posed a significant threat to the economic sustainability of East Germany. This was a problem for the Soviet Union, whose goal was to develop the DDR into a highly industrialized state that would provide major support to Soviet military aims. The crackdown included creating a 10-meter wide cleared strip along the border, a 500-meter controlled protective zone, and a 5-kilometer restricted area. This led to disruptions in border communities, with thousands forcibly resettled or simply choosing to escape to the west. This was just the beginning of the long evolution of the border. It would eventually lead to an elaborate system of guards, mines, fences, towers, and a deadly no-man's zone where people were shot on sight while attempting to escape. The Iron Curtain was becoming more than just a metaphor. In June, the United States Strategic Air Command began reflex alert deployments of Convair B-36 and B-47 Stratojet long-range nuclear bombers to overseas bases, including the Neuilly Air Base in French Morocco, which would place them within unrefueled striking range of Moscow. Lacking a countervailing force that could reach mainland America, Stalin instead began an aggressive buildup of his tank armies in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, creating what historian Vladislav Zubak called an armored fist. Exercise Mainbrace was the first large-scale naval exercise undertaken by the newly established Allied Command Atlantic, one of the two principal military commands of NATO. It was jointly commanded by Admiral Lynd McCormick of the United States Navy and General Matthew Ridgway of the U.S. Army. Mainbrace involved 9 NATO navies, including the United States Navy and the British Royal Navy. Operating in the Norwegian Sea, the Barents Sea, the North Sea near the Jutland Peninsula, and the Baltic Sea, its objective was to convince Denmark and Norway that those nations could be defended against attack from the Soviet Union. Stalin considered this operation warlike. On June 14th, President Truman laid the keel for the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus, at General Dynamics Electric Boat Division in Groton, Connecticut. Nuclear power has a crucial advantage in submarine propulsion because it consumes no air. It can remain submerged far longer than conventional subs, and reach places that conventional craft can't. On October 2nd, the United Kingdom successfully tested its first atomic bomb in the Montebello Islands of Western Australia. Britain had become the third nuclear power, after the United States and the Soviet Union. On November 1st, the United States detonated the world's first thermonuclear bomb near the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Physicist Edward Teller, the so-called father of the hydrogen bomb, was in Berkeley, California at the time of the blast. He was alerted to the successful test by observing a seismometer, which picked up the shock wave that traveled through the Earth the 4,000 miles between Berkeley and the Marshall Islands. On November 4th, retired General Dwight D Eisenhower, the architect of the Normandy invasion in World War II, defeated Adlai Stevenson in the 1952 U.S. presidential election. This legendary warrior would soon take up his role as the leader of the world's most powerful country and attempt to guide it safely through the next stages of the Cold War. Coming up, 1953, Stalin dies, an uprising in East Germany, the Cuban Revolution begins, and an armistice agreement ends fighting in the Korean War. All this and more. Next time on The Cold War, Year by Year.